first task we have to do this afternoon is to get back on schedule, because one thing Jeff and these guys in the NSPs are good at is not being on time. So we need to get back on schedule here, and that's why it's important. Our very first guest here today is the CEO of KLM, Pieter. But I want to just mention a few words today. First of all, 2020 to me was a disaster. I want to wake up tomorrow and I want it to be the 1st of January 2021. But there were significant things did happen in 2020. To me, the loss of the 747s of KLM, of IAG. When you see IAG and British Airways and KLM flying their aircraft into the desert, an aircraft that has served us since 1969, you know, and then you look at something like the A380. After a very, very short period in service, people very quickly come to the conclusion this aircraft doesn't work and it goes onto the scrap heap. And these are very significant events. It shows that the market is changing, and we've also gone through in the last year. I mean, now we're talking about COVID. If I was here this time last year, we'd be talking about two things: lack of capacity in Europe and the grounding of the 737 MAX. The MAX is going to fly again probably in November. I'm pretty confident about that. But now the big issue is who will buy that aircraft. In fact, who will buy any aircraft, because there is overcapacity in the system. So when you're trying to get started again, the practical problems that we're all facing are really, really difficult. And I don't think we've had a crisis like this before, where we're starting from such a low base. So I want to start today, and I'm going to ask all the panelists just for a couple of questions. And you know, I want to focus on specifics, if you don't mind, right? So I'm going to leave all the policy to Salvatore and to Jeff and all these guys who are good politicians. I always get in trouble for saying what I think, and then I come outside and say, shit, I should not have said that to him. But let's be specific. So I want to ask Pieter a couple of questions. First of all, I want to ask you, when do you think we're going to get long-haul services back? I want to focus on long-haul, because an airline like KLM, you know, using Schiphol, but it's the same as British Airways, it's the same as Iberia, it's the same as Lufthansa. If we don't get long haul going, so when do you see specifically we get long haul back in operation? What are you going to do about it, and how are you going to make it happen? And the last question is, what aircraft are you going to make it happen on?
Okay.
You got the floor.
I got the floor. I shall stand up, then at least I see everyone except we've been hidden there. We never stop flying long haul. Actually, we continue to fly long haul. So we do still fly roughly 50% of our long haul network in terms of coverage to those countries where we can fly. I.e., that means that we do have some 30 departures a day from Amsterdam still on long haul. We do operate roughly half of them as cargo only. We do have, I think that demonstrates the ability of the industry to be creative. We do have quite a few flights which are even have cargo in cabin, so that means we put cargo on the seats in order to optimize the cargo loads. I think it was mentioned by someone earlier in the speeches here. I think the importance of aviation somewhat is approached pretty one-dimensional, and what aviation is doing now in the midst of this crisis in providing healthcare to the public and making sure that we get medical equipment shipped over from many places in the world, that we get medicines, that we get mouth masks and all the stuff we need from different places in the world shipped over. So I think this is where, as an industry, we should be a little bit more vocal on what we've done. And to your point on the 747s, we decided earlier to ground our 747s. We did that in March, and we actually reintroduced into service 3 of our combis recently, in order to have a sort of air bridge between Amsterdam and China to bring back medical equipment to Europe, which was needed for the hospitals in the midst of the health crisis. So that's where we are now. So to your point, we're operating today roughly half of our long-haul network with terrible load factors. My ambition is to fly as much as possible, and to basically any place where it's safe and allowed to fly, we should restart the flights. The pattern of flights is still very erratic. We do have flights to Mumbai which go out completely empty and come back completely full, so it's still a little bit of a challenge, and I cannot encourage ICAO enough to come indeed with a standard set of rules and regulations. It's absolutely appalling that we do operate to 80 different countries in the world, which all 80 of them do have different measures. announcements like the UK did a week and a half ago to suddenly put passengers coming from Amsterdam, but there's more countries, in a forced quarantine is pretty disastrous for our business, and that means that even people who just transfer at the airport have to go in quarantine, which I think should be as a sort of standard being accepted. As an industry, I think we should be more active by sort of making mouth mask mandatory right from the start. We should have learned actually from China, in my perspective there. That has been done right away, and we took a little different approach, and we thought that the filters we have on board was enough of an elucidation, and I guess we, as the industry, we tend to believe that we are special and we take care of our own rules and regulations and things. We do that in the field of sustainability, but we should also do that in this field. We didn't have any Maxes on order, Eamonn, so that's an easy choice for us. We can wait and see what's happened. As KLM, we have a few 787s on order, and in fact means we are free to go by putting any orders. I don't think any board, by the way, would be too thrilled now with a multi-billion dollar of fleet order. My expectation is mine would neither be. So we first need to get out of this situation before we start to
Pieter,
see some light at the end.
Can I ask you one question? Okay, you're the recipient of a large amount of largesse from the Netherlands government with a lot of conditions attached, like everybody in Europe. The question for me is this: how are you going to make KLM profitable in the next 3 or 4 years? I mean, how are you going to come back to a situation where you're making a return on capital for your shareholders? How do we get back to this? What are you going to do?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic that the airline industry will rebound, and when it rebounds, we will be able to make some of the margins as we were making before. We were operating at a 7 to 10% margin in the last 5 years as an average. That's a margin whereby you can sort of return your loans. It's not yet the margin where you can offer enough return for your shareholders, but at least in returning the loans. I think we should speed up some of the steps we've been doing in the last few years in terms of digitization, optimization of processes, and probably, like we've seen with every previous crisis, has led to a consolidation of the industry, and I would assume that also this crisis, again, not in the next 12 months, because now everyone is supported by local governments. It's probably not the best time for consolidation in the midst of such support programs. But eventually, if we take 9/11 as the last big industry crisis, if we park the ash clouds for a moment, it has led to consolidation in the US. We know that the European consolidation is much slower, but my personal expectation is eventually it will drive further consolidation in the industry, which was about to happen anyway. But again, it's probably the next 12 months will be quiet, but after that it will go. And consolidation will lead to better margins, and with better margins, eventually loans can be returned. Again, the amount of loans, just to put it in perspective, and it's pretty public information, we had a debt position of 3 billion back in 2013. We reduced that basically to close to no debts anymore in the last year, and now we have another sort of loan of 3 billion. So it's a lot of money. It's not impossible to return.
Thanks, Pieter. It puts things in context in that this time last year, the European Air Traffic Management System, we had a surplus of 8 billion cash. Now I owe 5.3 billion.
Yes.
Okay, so everybody has problems. It's right through the value chain. Ioanna, if I could talk to you for a moment, sure, okay? Maybe you can come up here for a second. Yeah. Athens Airport. Okay, so I was very impressed arriving in yesterday, and I think Salvatore made the point, you know, straight away.
He was very kind with us.
COVID test, yeah, everything went very well. I was a bit shocked to be randomly picked out for a COVID test yesterday, having already got one in Brussels the day before. So I said, Jesus, maybe these guys know something I don't, okay? But in any event, what's the challenge for you? I'm just looking, your traffic has gone through the floor. It's been a disaster.
We have lost 2/3 of our traffic.
Yeah.
Yes. We are now year to date minus 63%.
You're minus 63%. So tell me, what do you think is going to happen to get you back? Forget about the airlines. What are you going to do to make the passenger more comfortable in the airport?
Well, first of all, just a few numbers. As mentioned before, year to date we have a minus 63% in passenger traffic.
You need to speak a little louder.
I will try to speak a little bit louder. In terms of supply, in terms of capacity in flights, we have a minus 41 to 43%, which is actually what does this show? It shows that the airlines are doing the best they can. They try to reinstate capacity in the market. However, there is a perfect non-balance. It's a non-balance market between supply and demand. And I'm saying that because during the last 6 years we had, as you probably know the numbers, so we had spectacular years, we had spectacular developments, and we had a very balanced market between supply and demand. The difference there was a 1% or something like that. Now it's almost 15%, so there is a perfect unbalanced market. Now what we are going to do, it depends a lot on when the passengers are going to trust again air travel. And I think that there are two lines of action there. The first one has to do with tactical actions and the second one with strategic actions. And it doesn't involve only Athens International Airport, but the aviation community on a global level. First of all, in terms of tactical actions, of course, all airlines and all airports, we have taken measures, health and safety measures. You were one of our, let's say, victims of these health and safety measures that the Hellenic government has made, especially the civil protection with all these random checks and everything. And at the same time, all the airlines have done the same thing. However, we tend to promote these health and safety measures, we are talking about ourselves. It's us talking about us. Now that we have the data, passengers having already started to travel as of mid-May, beginning of June, now we have the data to say that, aircraft and airports, they are safe places. You don't get the disease, there's no contagion from the aircraft, from your air traveling, or from the airport, from going around the airport premises. What I'm trying to say is the fact that we have to have a universal or a global marketing campaign trying to promote the data that there are passengers, they have been tested, some of them have been positive, all the others have been negative, there was no transmission there, and having also not us talking about us, but health experts or public health experts talking about us. I think this is important. We have to coordinate on that front. Now, strategic actions, the line of strategic actions, I think this is the time for the 3 C's, which is collaboration, cooperation, and consistency in policies proposed and implemented. Of course, all the distinguished speakers before, they have talked a lot about it, but we have to convince governments that there shouldn't be all these different uncoordinated measures. We've just discussed about the UK. There was another big European country saying that they are going to reinstate quarantine. This doesn't work. I mean, people, they are, when we had our market surveys and the surveys findings, we started again our surveys from May and up to, let's say, yesterday, the results were that yes, they take into consideration what is the COVID status on the destination, but at the same time, they are afraid of being stuck because they know that probably there will be changes in different measures along the way implemented, and they want to have a status which is stable, and this is very important. And I will make one of my favorite quotes. It was not something that I said. Archimedes, the ancient Greek, said it. He said, "Give me a place to stand, and I can move the earth."
Okay.
Pasto and Anantinaso. This is in ancient Greek. So actually, aviation needs that. It needs a place to stand. It needs coordinated policies, uniform policies, and something that the passengers will understand, and then we will regain.
Okay, so what you're saying to us really is that we got to get our communications act together.
Definitely,
Okay.
yes.
All right, can I move on to Abderahmane? Could you come up here for a moment? So we're looking at Africa. 500,000 flights last year, a 71% reduction in flights. It's been a disaster for Africa. Now, I don't think it's been any bigger a disaster than anywhere else, but the reality is that the flight situation has been very difficult. Also, we have the same problem I see in Europe, in Africa, uncoordinated measures. Now, one thing that has struck me travelling or looking around Europe is that the health ministers appear to rule the countries now. So what I notice is when you look at TV, we're generally faced with an array of doctors, and the politicians are copying out, say, well, that's the advice we got from the medic, and every medic can give you different advice. So can you tell us, how has Africa coped with this, number one, and number two, how are we going to get out of it? You got the floor.
Yes, thank you. Talking about harmonization in Africa, it's very difficult because you know we have 54 countries. So thanks to ICAO for setting up the COVID-19 Aviation Recovery Task Force and the recommendation from the CART takeoff guidelines. But when it comes to the implementation, it's really confused measures. From country to country, you have different measures. For example, for the COVID PCR test, some countries are putting a fee of $50.
Yes.
And some even $150, and they are asking the airline to put on the ticket price. And also the information of passengers is a big issue today. I've been pushing for coordination and information of passengers since June, but it's not really happening. For example, myself, I arrived here this morning at 1 a.m. When I was leaving Kenya, I take a PCR test. It was negative. So, and I didn't know about this QR code you have to get before you arrive in Greece, even if my friend Kostas sent to me by email, but my PA didn't really carefully read the message. And I had, I missed one flight. I had to take the next flight, so the time I get the QR code. More surprisingly, when I arrived here at the airport, I got a COVID-19 test for free. I had it in Nairobi for $100. So it's really now, it's very important that the industry harmonize the measures and that the passenger be aware of what they need to do before they travel. This seems to me very important. And at the African level, I've been pushing. We had some meeting organized by the ICAO regional offices, 2 meetings with DGs of aviation authorities. But unfortunately, this meeting was just each country to tell the others what they are doing. My purpose was really to try to coordinate things. The African Union Commission also set up a meeting between ministries of transport and ministries of health. Because the problem today is that the ministries of health is taking control of what has to be done without consultation of the Ministry of Transport. Unfortunately, this meeting was also only to inform each other about what is happening. So really, I think that the global aviation organizations like ICAO, IATA needs really to work forward so that by the time we get common protocols across the African continent and across the global world.
Okay, so in 1 year's time, how do you see the situation in Africa? Imagine you've got a globe. What's the ideal situation, given that COVID is going to be here? We're not going to have a vaccine. So we don't have a vaccine in 1 year's time. Where are we?
Yes, the situation in Africa today is that African Airlines have lost $8.8 billion compared to 2019.
Okay.
And we were expecting a restart from July. Now airlines are starting to operate from August, but the traffic is very low so far. And I'm worrying about the trend of COVID-19 cases in Africa, because we are still on the race in most of the African countries. And I do hope that the curve will go down soon, so that we can really reopen. And also the European Union, for example, has a list of citizens authorized to operate, to come in Europe. And only 2 countries in Africa citizens are authorized now. It's Rwanda and Tunisia. The first list, it was Rwanda, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. So according to the trend of COVID-19, African citizens are not allowed to come in Europe. And this is a big, big concern. And today you can see many European airlines operating to Africa, like British Airways, KLM, but still African airlines have difficulties to restart flying
for Europe.
To Europe.
Okay. All right, thanks. David, I can't imagine a more difficult job than this guy's got, running a regional airport, because whatever chance you've got to get Pieter to fly into a main airport, it's trickier for a regional airport. So here you're looking at the whole issue of low-cost travel. You're looking at dealing with a different brand of airline, maybe of less quality and maybe disreputable type of characters, but let's just say that it's a different market. You're trying to get things. So how are you coping with COVID? Because you can't, you know, I can't imagine you can afford all the money that Ioanna can to be testing everybody on arrival and, you know, getting the great airport fees that if you had KLM flying there and all of these kind of things get there. How are you coping as a small or secondary airport in Romania? Because this problem you have is common all throughout Europe, throughout Greece, throughout the UK, you know, the main airports, but then we have other airports. So let's hear your story.
Well, all the mid-sized regional airports were very affected. In our case, we are the second airport in Romania. Cluj Airport last year was 3 million passengers. This year, probably we will have 1 million, 30% compared to 2019 of the traffic, and of course a lot of issues. Compared to big airports, I consider we will have a delay in recovering because we expect connections. Already Lufthansa started again in Cluj, from Cluj to Munich. We had, before crisis, 4 flights daily, 3 to Munich, 1 to Frankfurt. Now we have 3 flights weekly. So the big carriers, small airports, mid-sized airports being feeders, I see a delay in recovering. We had to take a lot of measures to cut costs, to postpone our investments, to renegotiate the contracts. Also, it's very difficult with the employees. We managed for Romania, for regional airports, to make a scheme, and we hope to obtain state aid. Here we want to discuss, and we would like to have the support of Asia Europe to harmonize the state aid for small airports. Until now, the government approved state aid for Romanian airports until the end of June, but the crisis is continuing. Of course, we have also other issues, capacity of terminals because of social distancing. Being a small airport is difficult. In Cluj, we bought 2 tents in order to increase capacity, but it's a short-term solution. There is a lot of competition because locals, they put a lot of pressure to small airports and mid-sized airports. They would like to pay nothing. So again, Ryanair and Wizz Air, they come to small airports. Okay, we want money.
It's the other way around. Okay.
So not easy.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
So maybe if we could just kind of move off the subject of COVID. I think I'm COVID out and I'm zoomed out, and maybe just look at what happens when we get back to some kind of a normal situation in a year's time. So the big word here is sustainability. And maybe if I start with you, Pieter, the Netherlands has been very much to the forefront in what I would say attaching environmental and sustainability conditions to your assistance, but also to licenses, to the ability to operate. If you take Schiphol, for instance, you know, it has 4 to 5, I think 5 operational runways, you know, but not been used to the full capacity for local issues such as noise reduction and all that. So it's difficult to grow. What do you see as the future, Pieter, in terms of the industry? How can we grow from an environmental point of view? Because throughout Europe, we're looking at greens. Governments have changed. You know, we're looking at the EU Green Deal, and compatriot of your own, Commissioner Timmermans, you know, is very radical in the way he sees things. I get the impression sometimes he wants to stamp aviation out. So what do you feel is the future? How can we manage this delicate balance between environmental growth and profitability?
Well, I think aviation in general has not done too well in displaying what we have achieved so far. If we look for KLM, we have been able to achieve a 17% reduction in the CO2 emissions per passenger over the last few years. These have been driven largely by technology, new technology, engines, new investments in fact. That's one. Two, we have invested largely in biofuels, but we know that the availability of biofuels is relatively limited, and therefore we're going to build a factory in the northern part of the country where biofuels are being created. Thirdly, and we announced that last year, we've announced a initiative which we called Fly Responsibly, whereby we basically embrace collaboration with all the parties in the chain, and with that we have now created a coalition of parties ready to invest and ready to make the next step in terms of innovation when it comes to that. So we have a project running with the Technical University in Delft where we do some new aerodynamica features, which is going to be really the next step in terms of improvement. So if you add it all up and you make a comparison, and we were talking last night on some of the car industry, you see how much the aviation industry has done in terms of reductions in CO2 emissions per passenger. We have done really a lot. I think we should also use, and that's my last point on sustainability, we should use this momentum we have now to address some of the long-lasting, and one of these topics you will appreciate, for example, the single European sky. We could achieve overnight a 10% CO2 reductions for the entire European industry if we get a single European sky and we get rid of all the inefficiencies. And flying from Amsterdam to Athens yesterday and spending some time with the pilots, you could see how you're sort of navigating through the European airspace, and with that collectively we are burning 10% of CO2 as the collective airlines in the European airspace. So the combination of continued investment in alternative fuels, biofuel is one, collective action and initiative around innovation and using new aerodynamica, which is a bit of a long-term perspective. Three, having on the European side, some initiatives on the single European sky, and even trains on the European side. Amsterdam to Berlin is a 1-hour flight. It's a 7-hour train ride. So if we were to have a more effective train system, and that may sound a bit strange to say from an airline perspective, but I think it can take away some of the pressure, some of the capacity pressure from the system as well. And you're perfectly right in your introduction. If it were not for COVID, we would have discussing the capacity crunch in the airspace and the technical issues surrounding the MAX. So I think we as collective, and the European funds are now going to invest anyway, so let's use this momentum to have a better pan-European railway system, taking away some of that pressure, helping us with some of the emissions, and making sure that with that we can spend the scarce capacity on some of the long-haul flying. And to your earlier question, when will long-haul flying come back? We take 23, 24 as the time when it's back, but we need to have more investments to make sure that we can deal with that capacity crunch. The targets we get is for another 50% reduction compared to the pre-COVID situation. I think the years 2010 up to 2030 in terms of CO2 reductions. That's the targets we're getting from our government.
Thanks, Pieter. These aren't pre-formed questions because I make them up as I go along, and that's why I'm very unsatisfactory. So, Ioanna, I'm going to ask you a very question. Why would anybody in their right sanity invest in an airport? Why would you do that?
That's $1 million.
Listen to this guy. 2024 before he gets going again.
Well, I have to say that this is a difficult question at the moment. You know that there were billionaires in the US. I will not name names, but
yes,
they withdraw all their investments either from airports or from the airline industry. You know that.
Yeah, Warren Buffett. We name
Warren
him.
Buffett, exactly.
Let's do it.
So at this moment, yes, probably it seems a very tricky question, let's say. But it all boils down to the question, will we have a vaccine or an effective treatment soon? If we believe that this is the case, and if we believe, let's say, I will not name any companies or things like that, but if we believe what they say in the news, they say that early 2021 there will be a vaccine and it's going to be distributed.
So you think the vaccine will solve everything?
No, I'm just saying that a vaccine or an effective treatment will set us back in a course. I'm not saying that it will remedy everything and it will take years to come back again to where we were. But in any case, it will somehow accelerate things. If we consider that there is not going to be a vaccine or if there is not going to be an effective treatment, then it will take many years and it will change things a lot. So I think that investors will definitely monitor the overall situation, not only in airports, but also in airlines, and they will make their decisions accordingly. But in the cases of airports, I believe that if there is not going to be a vaccine or an effective treatment, I think that airports are going to change dramatically. And what I'm trying to say is the fact that, let's take aeronautical and non-aeronautical revenues, okay? Now our non-aeronautical revenues, they are linked to the passenger fleet, to the daily passenger fleet. If this situation continues, then this has to be decoupled. So we have to find other revenue sources.
So you're looking for a different financing model for airports?
Probably yes. If this continues, then
now, it's always amazed me that governments are very happy to pay for train stations, but they're not very happy to pay for airports. You know, and I've seen this.
Or security at train stations, whereas we pay for our own security.
So I'm going to come back again to you, Peter, for a second before I move back to these two gentlemen. Last question. Do you think consumer behaviour will change? Do you think the average guy from Delft, who used to poor you, will give up his holiday in Tenerife? He won't do it. Or particularly the Dutch, they like to go to Indonesia. Will this continue to happen, or do you think that we have broken the thing, we have broken the mold?
You ask me?
Yeah, I'm asking you directly.
No, I don't think any of that will change. There's two drivers. Do people feel safe and do they have the money to travel?
Okay.
And maybe certainly can we do it in a better, sustainable way. But people will go back traveling, and maybe to Ioanna's point, after 9/11, security at airports was the #1 issue. So what has been done, we've created security checks, and now you know that the person sitting next to you is not carrying any firearm because he has been checked. I'm sure that even before there's a vaccine, we'll find a way that you know that the person sitting next to you on board of the aircraft has been checked and has been sort of, he's good to go. So we'll find a way that the airport processes will be adapted to that, and I believe the people will continue to travel.
Okay, Abderahmane, can I ask you a simple question? Why is the aviation industry doing such a lousy job promoting the fact that we're safe from a health point of view and that we're doing everything correctly? I'm very impressed with the airport, I'm very impressed with your airline, and yet when I talk to ministers they say, here's the airline, you're the guys who brought this disease to Europe. Don't now tell me that, you know, you guys are actually going to be the cure. So what are we doing wrong in the industry that we're not able to convince our governments, our politicians, and that Salvatore's gone, and that he is not able to get traction to get everybody to be at least uniform? What are we doing wrong, or what could we do better?
Yes, I will say first that it's true that in Africa, the COVID-19 virus came on the continent by air. That is true.
Yes.
But at the same time, the cargo flights, the air transport was critical to bring protective equipment, all those things in Africa.
Yeah.
So I think we need to convince governments that air transport is really very important in Africa, because you see, as I said, we are 54 countries, and there is no competitive mode of transport like high-speed train route like in Europe. In Africa, air transport is very important, and also, you know, African is the last border of air transport development. It was supposed to double the traffic every 15 years. Okay, the COVID-19 is slowing down the growth of air traffic, but it will come in, I think, after the COVID in 3 or 4 years. And there are many projects at the African Union level, like the single African air transport market, the continental free trade area, which will support the growth of the African traffic.
So I have a question for you, just one. Would you invest in an African airline?
It depends which airline.
You pick it. Would you set up a Ryanair in Africa?
African airlines have been making loss for 10 consecutive years.
Yeah.
Only 4 or 5 airlines were making profit. But there is future growth coming, which I think will bring also sustainability for African airline transport. But you need a good governance, a good leadership.
Yeah, but what about a single African sky, like we have the single European market? I mean, you're never going to get an EasyJet or a Wizz or a Ryanair to operate continent-wide when you've got all these various restrictions and visas and stamps and all this thing. When is that going to happen?
Yes, it's on the way. It has been launched in January 2018. So far, 33 countries have signed.
Good.
And the implementation is being slow.
Fudged.
Very slow, yes.
Okay.
We have joint prioritized action to implement it, and we are pushing for that. It's not easy because many governments want to protect their national carriers. That's the problem.
All right, David. Again, I'm sorry to be always asking questions, but let's make it interesting. Why do you allow Wizz and Ryanair to fly into your airport, not charge them? Is it that you make more money on car parks? I mean, why do you do it? I mean, I wouldn't let these guys in if I can't get some money on them.
Well,
tell me about it.
Cluj is not in the position to give for free, but we have small airports around who would like to give for free, and who, because local communities are very, they want traffic, local communities, and
so it's for the pub and the taxi. Is it for all these guys?
Yes, and it's a pressure. Fortunately, we are not in this position. Probably we'll have to adapt a part of the tariffs.
Okay.
In Romania now, Blue Air and Tarom, they will receive state aid.
Yeah.
And probably they will survive. Otherwise.
Okay. So what do you see as the future for the small regional airline? You know, for the small regional airport, should I say? I mean, how can you convince a guy like Pieter there, to fly into it? Why would he fly to you?
It will be very difficult for the next 3 years. Also, the small airports, they will be dependent of local communities to support them, and it will be a very difficult time.
Okay, I don't envy you your job. Okay, guys, we're back on time. 17:50, Jeff. I left you, handed the ball to you. Thanks to the panel, everybody that was here. Really did a good job. How about a round of applause? Okay. It's exactly 17:51, and I'm handing it over to you.
Great, thanks.
Ciao. Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, guys. Well done.